Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Rooks Fun, and I'll be your guide in this meditative practice that enters into action and rhythm through the act of drawing. And I thought we'd meditate today on something that can fill up a little bit of that space with light and warmth. Looking into the lantern, and we try to bring some light into that growing darkness. This week's drawing exercise will first establish some space of the imagination, pulling into your own mind what lantern and light mean to you in your imagination. We'll begin with a practice of connecting the motion of our hands, the motion of our bodies, and our breath to expressing that imagination out onto the page, finding the shape of lantern for you, finding the figure and motion and interaction of many, building up a scene through repetitive action, and then digging into how we can bring brightness or light to some spots while exposing the shadow left in the cracks and locations of others. All you need for this practice is a pad of paper or something to draw on, a pen or pencil, and a little space around you to give yourself that time to explore your awareness and mindfulness through this act of drawing. Go ahead and gather your supplies, establish a space where you're comfortable, and let's draw together. Before we begin drawing, just take a moment to picture something light, something that brings light. To take a moment or two and center into our space, get set up and stable. Feel our feet on the ground and begin to use that platform of our feet or our seat to lighten up a little bit and expand, to connect with some image of a lantern providing light. And then use a little warm up on some scrap paper or a sketch page to think of how that might form on the page there. Generally starting from a place or a point, and perhaps reaching out and down something of a shade, something of a covering, something of a wrapping around that place of light. Or perhaps it's more of a shape or a sphere for you, using this time just to explore how you'll begin to enter into that. Something of a sphere, paper, a ball that holds some of the light. Or perhaps something more figured, just playing a little bit, thinking of how the light might be held. Or that small kind of bird cage with the light inside. And as you explore a few options, anything from the kind of abstract little jellyfish covering to the more representative or concrete lantern. And select one as the place to transition over to the other form. For me, I think I like just something draping out and over, draping and these concentric lines, these serial lines that begin to form some kind of shape of hanging over something light and floating, little jellyfish or ghost lantern. And then we'll let these populate the page as we work through some breathing exercise and just some visualization and awareness to get a little bit populated here on a fresh, open page. I'm going to take a breath in and feel around, just feel where my stance or position is comfortable. Let the pen begin there. And on the next in-breath, establish that location, and then as the breath flows out, begin to draw that first incarnation of your own lantern, wrapping a bit of space to hold the light. If it's made of many lines, beginning to enter into a rhythm of the breathing. As we breathe in to locate and out to express the mark. And this will be the rhythm I kind of guide with, but you can also experiment with that, switch it up a little bit, and breathe out on the location and in on the mark. There's no specific way to do it, just a connection and exploration of the breath. The chance to establish and take notice, to build that awareness, and a chance to release the attention into a little bit of expression. Depending on the complexity or speed with which you begin to draw, you can move on to new forms, new lanterns populating the page. Whenever you're ready, we'll just keep adding them around the page there, perhaps playing with a little bit of the gravity and how they form up around each other. They all remain in one direction. Or do some of them tilt from side to side or rotate, creating a little bit of that world there with the breath in and expression out. And each one may resemble its neighbor, but find its own unique form. Perhaps each one an iteration more than a copy, something different but related. Each one a chance to explore and refine that making of a mark, a figure, connecting around space, shape. Sticking with our awareness around the breath that holds shape for our body, establishes the extents of expansion in the rib cage, in the belly, in the shoulders, establishes the extents of contraction as the weight of our body and of our diaphragm expel the air. That entry point into awareness, local and contained within us, partially within our guided control, but also beyond our every moment attention, operating on its own. And using that space of the autonomic and the guiding to find balance, to find connection internally with our attention to our space, to our influence on the shaping of that space. To bring some awareness, practice into our day. So we can use that in other places, whether it be here, in the connection to the motion of our hands, the action direct of our body, connected to that breathing in and expressing out, or perhaps that can influence other actions through the day. Giving them some rhythm, some stability, not necessarily control, but a guidance or an interface for things that happen automatically, involving others, involving nature. The breath and entering into that space of meditation, that in-between moment of finding attention as some form of shaping, guidance, or control, and releasing expectation, releasing the grasp of intention out through those marks, each traveling its own newly established path there on the page. Out through the breath as it begins to drift from our foreground attention into the background through a combination of steadying, of entering in, and of the natural, normal fatigue that can come with any kind of practice, whether physical or mental. Holding something in attention gradually brings us to some form of fatigue, and that's when we can take a break from it, trusting, in the case of the breath, that it will keep going there in the background without our direct influence. And then bringing that attention into the space we've established here of action, beginning to recognize and look for where you're already guiding or influencing the forms and shapes as you draw, where you may be practicing a bit of visual composition, perhaps at first just behind the eyes, an autonomic response to the visual page. But then as your attention ignited by the first exercise in the breath can now narrow in and see new opportunity, whatever you may be drawing, letting that focus just in each new implementation of the action be guided by that intuition behind the eyes, but also give yourself some space to guide what you see. A practice in the in-between. any kind of creative act, a balance between intent, maybe purpose or concept being the word, and openness, listening, watching, trusting something in the formation of that interaction between technique, between ourselves, between our rhythms and awareness, and between our intent. And now we should have a generally sizable collection of forms around the page, as you may finish out a few in process in the mind, in that exercise of seeing what is forming, of entering into it through the act of drawing. And occasionally coming back and just observing how that has influenced the breath and other conditions without guiding, just feeling the rise and fall, checking in that we're not holding too tightly. And we can begin to look for maybe spaces of that light to enter the lantern form, the floating or the shaping. Is that something hidden within each form? Light from a source, taking a shape. For me, begin just by seeing a place inside, kind of ellipse or oval, a figure within the shape, with a little bit of extra tone or line around it, the darkening at the edges of that form inside. Just continuing the lines or curves of the lantern around the established form of the light. But some lines remain visible on top of as we see through the shade to find that brightness, that shine. We add layers of darkening around. And again, each moment in these floating figures, an opportunity for repetition, practice in drawing and seeing, finding a way to see through the hand, but also an opportunity for play, practice in making new forms, new figures. Not every light has to shape the same. Here in the virtual open space we may have on the page, we can play outside of representation or reality and just find an action from the idea. If you're using pen, add this bit of darkening with layers of lines. This can work with pencil as well, but if you're using pencil, you can also do some shading, softening that darker space around the form of the light. Maybe I find kind of rhythm and a little outward relaxation and play and shaping that source of brightness, source of occluding the material and darkness, just letting the pen or pencil find the shape through several revolutions of the track around, thickening its edge, and just feeling that motion of the hand draw something, a little bit of fun coming out of it. An emergent, perhaps intention or position within the drawing, I find is an intentional misalignment coming out of just the play, but observing the light shape wobbling, changing figure, being separate from the form, the motion of the lighter floating lantern shape, producing some contrast of in and out of the container and the contained. I like to work back and forth across shapes already explored and ones still waiting in the collection, sometimes as a way to see new things as the journey progresses and carry that through the many changes that develop along the way, just propagating through the field. Nothing ever quite fixed or finished. Just a part of the page in action, growing out of this interaction of our attention, our awareness, our opening up of a space to move that pen or pencil, to play a little bit in this game of line, shape, curve. And we can take the next few minutes to follow whatever techniques and conditions have emerged there on your page, continuing to explore a bit of quiet, just drawing from what you see, or even taking a break, just letting the eyes close and sit with the space you've opened up, whatever feels good for you this morning. We'll begin to wind down the practice. Come back into our space. If you're in the middle of something in terms of the drawing, enjoying the motion of your hand, continue it for a few more strokes. But start to find a place where you can let it come to rest. You can always come back and finish something in the drawing later on. It's good to take stock as we've been engaged for a while in the practice, to not necessarily use up too much of that energy, or just to take a few breaths outside of it to see what we may not be seeing, to feel what we may not be feeling in those moments of attention. To take a deep breath in and maybe let the hands come to rest, to sit palm down on your paper or desk or lap. Take a couple of deep, relaxed breaths. And turn the hands over, let them rest on the backside on a surface. Bring some attention into how the hands feel. Is there a difference with the one that's been drawing and the one that's maybe been more stationary? Give them a little bit of a stretch, and then work out from there to extend. Roll the shoulders back into a deep breath, and let it out and let them just fall relaxed. And maybe just move the spine a little wiggle from side to side, a little flexing everything back into some juiciness to move around for the rest of the day. After completing the exercise and finding a flowing, quick way to draw the actions here, to bring Lantern out from the imagination, I feel we may have been inspired by our other lantern friends, the colorful fly that has been invading many places, beautiful but also invasive and destructive. But maybe it's something on the mind, something we see around and struggle with, the creature in its multitude being destructive but also beautiful, of bringing with it something to look at in spectacle and something in many ways to fear or attack or engage with. And how do we balance that interaction, those ethics? So perhaps it's floating there at top of mind, bringing light and dark together, symbolic as well as actual. Whatever your lanterns look like, perhaps they're just some floating paper figures or things out of the old oil lamps of the 19th century. Hopefully they can bring some light to your day, some warmth to those cooling nights, and some expression to your creativity. Thanks for joining along in the mindful practice. If you like it, give it a thumbs up below, leave a comment, let me know how you did, and please share it with your friends, and check out many of the other episodes that explore this practice of mindful drawing through a variety of different techniques, subjects, and ways of finding expression, relaxation, and hopefully a little bit of fun. This is Rooks is Fun, signing off, and draw well. Thank you.